Welcome to the NarrowSpaces podcast, a limited engagement masterclass where leaders are invited to share their lessons learned and experiences in navigating those narrow spaces of work and life. We are creating a true masterclass in leadership. When the space between work and life is narrow, balance is impossible. I want to encourage you to be brave enough to lead in the narrow spaces. Welcome to this episode of NarrowSpaces, where we explore critical intersections of mental health and wellness in both work and life. Today's episode deserves a bit of framing, and you'll see why shortly. I want to share some important statistics and context that underscore the significance of addressing mental health in the workplace and its profound impact on productivity, employee well-being, and overall organizational success. Years ago, I served on the board of a counseling center, but I must admit, my understanding of mental health was limited. Despite having completed standard educational psychology courses and working with youth in the nonprofit sector, I was still new to grasping how the complexities of work and life intertwined. Back then, I believed it was possible, perhaps even preferable, to compartmentalize work and life. I thought that managing opposition and tension was just part of the deal. However, my perspective shifted dramatically during a personal crisis. Many of us shared a unique experience in 2020 when our work and home lives collided and the narrow spaces between them became more intertwined than ever. As businesses adapted to remote work, isolation became a pressing concern. To combat this, I hosted laughing lunches for employees, just creating opportunities for social interaction during a time of uncertainty. The impact of mental health on workplace productivity is significant. A study by the American Psychological Association found that employees with unresolved mental health issues are 2 to 3 times more likely to experience decreased productivity. In my own life, working from home meant that personal challenges, like celebrating a new pregnancy while preparing for my father-in-law's cancer battle, they were just 3 feet away from my computer. It felt manageable at first, until my own father's health took a turn for the worse. Coming from a tumultuous family background, I'd always valued boundaries. I rarely returned home, and when I did, it was with caution. On the morning of my father's passing, I chose to break my own boundary to see him one last time. Surrounded by my siblings, I felt grateful to honor my roots. Yet moments later, unresolved family tensions erupted, culminating in a physical altercation with my brother. The experience highlighted how generational mental health issues can have unintended negative consequences. Tragically, the stress from this altercation contributed to the loss of my baby. In the weeks that followed, my own mental health became a critical concern. Being in an HR role, I was acutely aware of how unresolved mental health challenges affected performance, relationships, and overall wellness. While I wasn't ready to use our employee assistance program, the EAPs, I was fortunate to have the support of fellow professionals. One particularly supportive supervisor even offered to drive me to a doctor's appointment, recognizing that the stress that I was under during this pandemic plus phase was extreme. The Employee Assistance Professionals Association reports that organizations with EAPs see a 30% reduction in absenteeism and a 40% improvement in productivity. In my previous leadership roles, I delved into the financial impact of EAPs and discovered that for every dollar invested in mental health support, companies can expect a return of $4 on improved health and productivity. If you're part of a company or a benefits plan that includes an EAP, take a moment to explore what's available. And if you're in a leadership position, remember to share EAP information with your team, ensuring that everyone has access to these vital resources. However, let's be honest, Sometimes we crave support from those who truly know us, rather than from strangers, even in confidential settings. The journey from recognizing the need for help to actually seeking professional support can be a long one for many of us. Reflecting on my own experience, I realized that the community around me was what made a difference during my time of need. Time didn't stop for any of us. We had to continue working through grief, loss, and anger while maintaining strong boundaries and honest communication. Supportive women in my network sent meals, groceries, care packages, even cake, reminding me that I wasn't alone. This raised a pivotal question. What if there was a way for other professional women to receive this kind of support? What else would they need? This was one of the driving forces behind the creation of NarrowSpaces. For many, there's a temptation to simplify this return to the status quo after experiencing significant challenges. The return to office trend we've seen over the past several months poses its own set of mental health challenges. As you'll hear today with my guest, men and women often approach these challenges differently, not just due to societal expectations, but also because of inherent differences in brain chemistry. As the COVID-19 pandemic unfolded, it became clear how profoundly it affected women's workforce participation. Many women left their jobs due to increased caregiving responsibility, especially with the school closures and the shift to remote education. According to Forbes, 24% of working women had to step away from their careers due to COVID. McKinsey & Company reported that approximately 2 million women in the U.S. exited the workforce between 2020 and 2021. This loss had lasting ramifications on the workplace dynamics. Flexible work arrangements and clear expectations became essential as balance proved elusive. A survey from FlexJobs found that 73% of professionals believed that flexible work options would reduce stress and improve mental health. While this need for flexibility isn't exclusive to women, many men have also reported enhanced quality of life from an increased family time. As 2020 concluded, I made several observations during my own healing process. The first is this: the care and concern showed by my employer increased my commitment to performing my best. Second, greater flexibility in my schedule allowed me to be more present at home. I recognized that working women needed access to support, professional development, and guidance for their own physical well-being. This inspired me to assemble a team of talented women to create a platform for delivering support in that specific way, leading to the formation of the Brave Women Project. Early on, fostering psychological safety was paramount, ensuring that our members felt secure in sharing their experiences. Today, we're a strong nonprofit organization with international membership, advocating for the importance of psychological safety. Today, we are a strong nonprofit organization with international membership, actively advocating for the importance of psychological safety, access to mental health services, and the value of female leaders in the workplace. As the founder of the Brave Women Project, I'm honored to lead this important discussion. We understand the unique challenges women face in balancing their professional and personal lives. That's why I'm excited to introduce my guest today, Brett Holtz, co-founder of MensxMental. Brett is a passionate advocate for global mental health, drawing from his experiences in sports to promote mental wellness across cultures. According to the World Health Organization, depression and anxiety cost the global economy approximately $1 trillion each year in lost productivity. The National Institute of Mental Health reports that 1 in 5 adults in the U.S. experience mental illness annually. While we're beginning to address these issues, research shows that many still feel uncomfortable seeking help. The Business Group on Health found that 60% of employees are reluctant to discuss mental health with employers due to stigma. Meanwhile, 76% of workers believe mental health is a priority, but only 34% are comfortable discussing it with their managers. Brett's journey from sports to psychology and his dedication to building equitable wellness programs make him an excellent guest for our discussion. Through this work with MensxMental, he aims to bridge the gap between work and life for men, fostering open conversations about mental health. Together with MensxMental, we are committed to addressing the gender-specific needs of mental health and total wellness. A crucial aspect of this journey is fostering psychological safety, creating spaces where individuals can express their thoughts and feelings freely. Join us today as we explore how we can cultivate supportive environments that prioritize mental health and promote holistic well-being for everyone. I'm excited to have Brett on NarrowSpaces, as his work embodies our mission, making room for honest conversations in the in-between, where work, identity, and well-being intersect. All right, Brett, from your journey, it's from the baseball fields around the world to mental health advocacy. This journey is powerful. It's one of the reasons why I was so excited to talk with you today. I want to get to the big moments. What was a moment or experience that made you realize this was the work you were called to?
It was exactly in the summer of 2021. I had just finished up school, graduated virtually, was about to get a job that I didn't want to do or take. Just ended a relationship that wasn't meant to be, and it really felt like I was going through this eat, pray, love moment in my life. Right, had this incredible opportunity to play the game that I've played my entire life, baseball, internationally in a completely different context and part of the world where I knew absolutely no one. And what I realized through my time there was, while I was still thinking about what I wanted to do after the fact, right? I knew that this summer was going to be like a one-off kind of opportunity, but just still being so people oriented and being so focused on creating relationships. Throughout my conversations I was having with teammates out there, I realized that I was having the same kinds of discussions and conversations as I was there with people back home, right? So it kind of made me realize that this whole notion of mental health being so hyper focused on where I'm from and just the people in my community, I'm like, no, this is something going on around the world. And it's not just in my backyard. For me, it was just throughout the constant conversations and relationships that I was forming out there that summer that helped me realize, like, okay, there's something that I need to be doing in this space where I think I have a very unique position to do so. And it's funny just how life shakes out, right? Here I am nearly 3.5, 4 years later, and my current scope and my current job working international markets and kind of getting to understand some of the cultural nuances and experiences and stigmas that necessarily I wouldn't have grown up with or been aware of.
Well, Brett, I think you've painted a really good picture for the people who are interested in this episode today is that, when your work and life are integrated, then there is this ebb and flow and there is this energy transfer that we get to enjoy. We get to live the life we deserve because we're living in this life according to our values. And as you really articulated in a way that I think maybe was a little painful for surely painful for you, but painful even for athletes who are listening, that that identity as athlete, as champion, as pursuer of gold medals and the team element, there is something difficult about walking away from that when the time comes. Um, your experience has given you a perspective on how maybe particularly men in particular have the ability to show up differently at work when their mental health is supported. And maybe you could talk a little bit about what you've observed there and in those ways that men can show up differently at work when their mental health is supported or when their mental health is ignored. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't at least preface with this, right? Again, I'm not a father. I'm an uncle, proud uncle. But I think again, as men are maturing, growing up, finding their place in this world and life, right? A lot of the conventions that have been put on men is that they are the provider of the family and that, it's all on them. The financial wellness of the whole household, the overall well-being of the house, right? All these things kind of feel like they tend to fall more on the man, right? I think we're clearly in a day and age where dual income households are absolutely a thing. I'm a huge proponent of that, right? But there are still a lot of people, even in my immediate life, that the man works and provides, and the wife stays home and tends to, the house duties and familial duties. But what I tend to see in those conversations with some of those people is just the immeasurable amounts of pressure and stress that build up, and it tends to lead more towards substance abuse and coping with alcohol or drug use, right? And it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when that they're going to have some sort of episode, or some sort of breakdown at some point in time. Um, Again, a lot of the work that I see through MensxMental, right? It's so much more in the athlete context, right? Where, of course, it's a game that you're striving for to be the best in, and Olympic whatever it may be, whatever the context, right? When it comes to life, there's no shot clock, right? There's no end zone you're striving for, right? The parameters are completely what you make of your own. And I think a lot of men still kind of struggle with knowing that they have to make as much money as possible, have the nicest house as possible, all these things. Yet clearly we're in a world today where it feels like everything is so stacked against everyone, let alone men. So I that's what I would speak to in terms of the male experience when it comes to just wellness overall. I think there's an acknowledgement of it, but then there's still this harsh reality of I don't feel like I had the time to prioritize my mental health because I have XYZ responsibilities. And it comes down to that at some point in time. But what I try to make it a point to say to those individuals in those moments is that, look, in order to reach those goals, there still has to be you, right? So that's where I'll try to incorporate some language around a care plan. And again, 24 hours is a long amount of time in a day. There is at least 5 minutes they could find for yourself to help ground you, or just be like, hey, deep breath, something, so that it doesn't feel like it's just constantly stacking on your shoulders, right? So just chipping away. And again, just understanding that these things aren't going to go away after one conversation. It's just how do you plant that seed, right? And just try to germinate it and see over time, just through consistency and check-ins, how they're doing, how they're improving. But it's such a tough thing to triangulate, right? Like I really feel like with mental health, it's such a case by case basis where it's on the shoulders of HR teams and people teams, right? To try to communicate these resources and communicate this kind of support that's out there, but it's still on that user, right? To use those things. So it's just trying to bridge those gaps as much as I can, and just try to be a true buddy and mentor. They look, what does your company offer? Maybe you should look into those resources, right? Or I have no problem being, the quote unquote therapist in the interim, but this is like trying to put a band-aid, on a gushing wound, or just a slowly bleeding wound, right? You have to do a little bit more here, and it starts from within. It has to be intrinsic.
I think that you really narrow down that there's two things. There's one, this intrinsic knowledge and motivation to get real when there is something that just doesn't feel right. And then there's this point of access. And we all, for many people who work in organizations that have employee assistance plans, we know there's that 1-800 crisis number you can call. And
Yes.
some benefits packages have mental health as part of their benefits plan. But it's a lot of steps to get to that point. And so you mentioned that there's these casual conversations with your buddies at the bar or in the locker room. And I think one of the reasons MensxMental was interesting to me is, as the founder of the Brave Women Project, we acknowledge that there's a different pressure on men and women, especially professionally. And so the work that we do is, helping women navigate the heavy load that they carry emotionally. They're remembering all the birthdays and all the things that have to happen
Yeah.
in a household and in a family and in an organization. And so psychological safety is just a really critical component of our support groups.
Mhm.
When we think about men's mental and men's mental health, sometimes the best avenue to have those conversations is in those, while you're on the golf course swinging the golf clubs together, when you're in that carefree time of sitting together looking at a game, watching a game while you're drinking at the bar. So,
Hmm.
how would you recommend starting a conversation about mental health that men need to hear? How would you even start that conversation for people who are thinking,
Wow.
wow, this is something I'd love to talk with my buddies about?
I mean, that's a great question. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer, right? I think you're not going to know until you try. I know for me, when I've tried in my contacts with my buddies, right? And thankfully there are people that are in our, again, ecosystem of interest. I'll just say, I just completely that was completely off the cuff. But there are a lot more baseball players, for example, right? MLB baseball players that are becoming a lot more vocal about their own mental health struggles and just again what it's been like going through the game, trying to make it to the highest level possible, right? And some athletes to name, Jaron Duran. There was a more recent. I'm a Yankees fan. Sorry, I know you're based in Pittsburgh. You might be a Pirates fan. But there was a recent article published this week, actually, about one of the Yankee star players this year, Trent Grisham, talking about how he just 180'd his mindset, and he's been able to perform and be present a lot better this year as opposed to the past few years, right? So it's kind of noticing those little connections, right? Where again, people know me as the established mental health guy in the friend group or just in the community, whatever it may be, and that invites a way to kind of begin a conversation around it, right? And look, also it's just my personality, right? I have no problem. I think a lot of my friends, if you were to ask them, they'd be like, Brett, like shut up, like you ask too many questions. But I'm a curious person, and I think I always make it a point to be that friend to say, I love you guys, I'm here for you, talk to me whenever, right? To the point where they're probably sick of me. But I think because I try to establish myself like that, it allows for those little moments, right? Where my buddy texted me that article with Trent Grisham yesterday, and we had a wonderful conversation, right, about mental health currently, his experiences growing up, right, and especially because we played baseball together, right? We had different experiences, right? So it's just little moments like that, I think. But to answer your question more directly, I would say it's again, it comes from someone just ripping the band-aid off at some point in time, right? And it could be something that you're noticing in the news and use that as a way to kind of launch the conversation, or kind of be real, right? I think there are the same friend group that I'm thinking about right now as I'm kind of giving you this answer. I have known them essentially for the past 24 years of my life, right? They're your best and worst friends at the same time. They're the ones that are giving you a hard time, but they're also the first ones to check in with you when things are going wrong, or also to congratulate you right away, right? But I think sometimes we take for granted that because people have been of our lives for so long, they're just these fixtures, right? And I think it's a necessity, especially for young men like in my age group, to be again in your mid to late 20s. This is a very ambiguous time of life, right? Where we should be making a point to check in with one another and just like simply, hey, how are you doing? Could go such a long way. So, I would say just again, maybe not be as afraid to like when you're asking the question of how you're doing, don't just have it be a filler. Truly mean it, right? When you're asking that to someone, and I think you'd be really surprised with what they hit you back with, right? And I think that's where a lot of the beauty in life, you start to realize it. And Holly, I can't even tell you in these past 3 years, I've really been doing this, right? More full time. The amount of people in my life that have made it a point to reach out to me. I was just on the phone for an hour yesterday with one of my best friends. Grew up with her, talking about her anxiety, right? And I'm not saying that I am a again licensed professional to any extent, but I think sometimes it's just about making it a point to be that person in people's lives.
Well, it makes so much sense. And I love that, we started a conversation with modern health as the, as the real purpose for talking and learning about this history. But I think that your passion and pursuing mental health through the corporate side, you're internationally, you're working internationally for modern health. you're working on the athletic side with MensxMental to be that advocate. So when do you feel like your work really matters the most?
Wow. I mean, I feel like it matters the most once I get to have those conversations with people, right? In whatever context. And we have this saying, within MensxMental, right? If we impact one life, then it's a job well done, right? I think my work with modern health allows me to satisfy certain needs in life, like benefits, salary, right? 401k, those kinds of things, right? But with something like MensxMental, some of the most impactful conversations I've had in my life, right, have come from those contexts. And you know, young athletes, right, like well younger than me, sharing that they've had suicidal ideation, and that, or they've had family members that have committed suicide, or best friends at that young of an age, attempt and commit suicide, right? Um, they've said that how us coming to speak, to their group when we did, it just shifted something in them, right? Where there's no dollar exchange happening, right? But like, if I was the one force, or me and my co-founder, or Teddy, or sorry, he founded it, I just work alongside him. Again, if we just have these moments, there's like, you know what? It's like, it's okay if we didn't get a paycheck, right? We more than likely saved that child's life to some extent. So that's where I kind of feel like, you know, it really matters the most, and just how I show up and whatever I'm doing. And I think that's always the toughest thing for people to realize, right? Because look, we're all human. I, Holly, just like you, I'm sure there is so much going on in my life right now, and so many things I'm constantly weighing and going back and forth in. But it's just, the real currency in life is the relationships, right? That you cultivate with people, and are able to maintain throughout your life, despite how much time and distance gets between you. And I think it's how I could show up and be as present as possible. And whenever interaction that I'm having, right, it does hold effect, and it's something I try not to take for granted, that despite me maybe not feeling as great a certain day, right, I still have an opportunity to impact someone, right? Or just be a soundboard for them, or just be something different in their day that they look forward to, right? And it's something I try not to take lightly. And even in the work that, again, that you and I first got to know each other through modern health and sales, there's a lot of rejection, as you know, right? And I think it's so much more waiting for that right moment of, you found that right partner, and you're well on this path to an incredible partnership, right? And it's just it's about weeding through all those no's to get to that yes. And I would say it's about, again, those moments in life, how can I just show up and be as present as possible, and just be the authentic self that I know myself to be. So that's how I think it's really matters most, in how you show up.
I think you, Brett, you gave us a couple things to think about that are really critical. The first is that there are resources out there, whether it's through MensxMental, whether it's through trusted individuals and trusted people in your life, or through an employee assistance plan, that if there's if you tuned in today because the topic of mental health is important, then there's this might be that call to just do one step in the right direction to connect with someone at a deeper level, showing up authentically. The second thing I heard you share is that, there is a journey that we're each on. And when we recognize that there's people who are going to be alongside us in the journey, we can pay attention and give them that pause and a little bit of room to speak and breathe. And finally, that the narrow spaces of work and life, especially if you're a leader of an organization, that when you're in the narrow spaces of work and life and your employees are in those narrow spaces, there are resources that we can proactively provide access to. And then,
Absolutely.
one little bonus that, you talking about your work with MensxMental, and how there's a focus on educating young athletes and athletes in their developmental stages. And we know about the brain that specifically the adult brain is not fully formed until the 20s. And
Right.
so there's college athletes who are going to roll off out of that athletic phase into civilian life. And so it sounds like MensxMental might be a great place, a great resource for parents who have children in sports, or even, mentors who know that there's a journey. It sounds like there's some real passageways here that we can leave people with. So I want to ask you one final question, Brett.
Sure.
Being trained in mental health, being working in industry, being an advocate in nonprofit work in this space, but also navigating for yourself the ebbs and flows, the great highs and terrific lows of playing sports at a high level, just in life. When the narrow spaces feel particularly narrow, how do you personally reset and refocus so that you can show up tomorrow to be that person for someone who needs you?
I was thinking about sharing this before you asked this question, but I think it's even more relevant. So I'm glad that you asked it. I had this director at Modern Health that hired me actually, and we were having a conversation once, and she said something to me that I swear to you has kept with me. I've kept with me since. It's this idea of that, Brett, no one ever really knows what they're doing. They're just trying to figure it out more and more each day, right? And I feel like that couldn't hold more true for someone like me, right? I think it's only natural as human beings to compare yourself to the people closest in your life, right? And for me, I've always had my siblings to aspire to and look up to, and there were times where, if you look on paper, older brother's a lawyer, my older sister's a nurse, and then there's just like, there's Brett. What is he doing? What's he figuring out? And I think I'm at a point now in my life, Holly, where I'm confident enough to say that I am figuring it out, and I think that's all that we have to be content with, right? And if you feel good about what you're figuring out, that's all you can ask for, right? I try to lead my life each day the way I lead it. And who am I to expect anything more, right, than just only what's in my control, right? And knowing when to push and knowing when to pull back, right? I think that's an interminable battle that we're always going to be faced with until we kind of figure out these things for ourselves, right? Whether it's these mini or micro realizations. I would say just understanding that it's not just you going through what you're going through. Everyone else is going through their own version of something, right? And that hopefully that could allow for you to be kinder to yourself, right? And just learn to notice and take away the little ones of the day, and just go off of that.
Yeah,
Really, this day by day mindset.
Brett, I think that's a lot of courage that you're leaving people to think about, that we don't have to have it all figured out. That some days the best we're going to do is that minute by minute. I really appreciate that. I think when we talk about mental health, it's a tender spot. It's a tender place to invite people into. And so I really want to thank you for just having the courage to have some of that space open today. I know that people are going to be really interested in learning more about MensxMental and about modern health and about even your baseball history. And so there's going to be information in our show notes. But man, I appreciate the tender space of vulnerability you shared with me today. We don't often get to see that with men who are pursuing that, the work and the life of what we believe. And so your being open about figuring it out is meaningful for me and for all of us. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you for this opportunity to be on this wonderful, wonderful podcast with you. And, I'm always in your corner, right? So I'm looking forward to our next conversation and how we could work together at some point in time, and how we could, collaborate in the future. So thank you for the opportunity. Really looking forward to what's next for both of us.
That's right. All right. Hey, I'll see you on the other side.
Sounds great, Holly.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Right.
So, what did you hear in this episode? Inside those narrow spaces, we are all seeking more humanity, grace, connection, peace. Here are a few highlights to think about. The first one is this, that there are stigmas and societal expectations. Men often face societal pressures to conform to traditional notions of masculinity, which can discourage them from seeking help. The stigma surrounding mental health can lead men to feel that they should just tough it out rather than express vulnerability or seek support. A second point addresses the barriers to help-seeking behaviors. Research indicates that men are generally less likely than women to seek mental health treatment. A study published in the Journal of Psychological Medicine found that men are less likely to use mental health services, partly due to the fear of being perceived as weak or inadequate. We can all work together to overcome this. A third key point is to understand the types of issues presented today and in general. Men may be more likely to present externalizing disorders, such as substance abuse or aggression, rather than internalizing disorders, such as anxiety or depression. This can affect how they are treated and the types of interventions that are considered appropriate. Our fourth tip is the communication styles. Be aware that men often use different communication styles, which can impact their therapy experience. They may be less inclined to discuss emotions directly, or they may prefer problem-solving approaches rather than exploring feelings, and that's okay. When we're talking about therapeutic approaches, they may need to be tailored for better engaging of men. For instance, incorporating physical activity, group therapy, and more solution-focused techniques can resonate better with male clients who may find traditional talk therapy less appealing. Be creative. When it comes to accessing resources, men may have different access to mental health resources based on their roles and responsibilities, such as various work commitments or family obligations. Additionally, there are often fewer male-specific programs or services, which can limit options for men in seeking help. Let's talk for a moment about suicide rates. Men are at a higher risk for suicide compared to women, particularly in certain age groups. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, men accounted for approximately 79% of all suicides in the US in 2019. This highlights an urgent need for mental health interventions. And yes, there are cultural factors that influence this. Cultural norms and values can also influence men's mental health treatment. Men from different cultural backgrounds may experience additional barriers, such as language differences, cultural stigma, or a lack of culturally competent providers. I would be remiss to not mention the workplace dynamics. Workplace culture can impact mental health for men and women. High-pressure environments may discourage help-seeking behavior, while supportive workplaces that prioritize mental health can help mitigate these issues. As a leader, make sure that you are providing information for EAPs in every possible correspondence. And finally, our 10th topic you heard about today is diversity and intersectionality. Men's mental health treatment must also consider intersectional factors such as race, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic status. Different groups of men may face unique challenges and barriers in accessing care. Addressing these nuances is essential for creating effective mental health services that cater to the specific needs of men. By acknowledging and adapting to these differences, mental health professionals can better support male clients in their journey towards well-being. Be sure to refer to the show notes for resources to help you connect with organizations like Modern Health, Brave Women Project, and MensxMental to continue along your own wellness journey. This is an important conversation for us to have when we think about the narrow spaces of work and life. Thanks for joining me for this special episode where we tackle a big issue from the outfield and into the office. Thanks for joining us in the narrow spaces of work and life. What do? I'm on a mission to help people to have the best work of their lives. I help leaders do good. I help managers be good, and I help employees feel good. And when leaders are good, employees are engaged, energized, effective. And together, we get to live the life we deserve. Be sure to check out the show notes for more information on where to connect with our guests and sponsors and experience all things Narrow Spaces at narrowspaces.com, where you can gain access to this episode, subscriber extras, and more.